Welcome back live from SEC Media Days. It is Nashville. That's right. We're in Nashville and joined by a very special guest, Rick Neuheisel, longtime.
I'm not sure how special, but I'm here.
No, I really.
I've never been crowded into a booth like this with the great announcer that I'm sitting next to.
I don't know about great, maybe slightly below average, but Rick, you were absolutely known as one of the better offensive coaches when you were involved in college football. And I'm just curious, as a whole, when you see the TCUs and, of course, the Tennessees, which I cover nowadays, did you ever think that offense could change that drastically and the time that you're around watching football?
You know, my old coach, Homer Smith, would say, the field's 53 and a third yards wide. It's 120 yards long. The 11 on 11, the possibilities are endless. And because coaches spend their lives looking at the X's and O's and the geometry of the game and trying to get advantages, whether it be physical matchups, angle match advantages, it's endless in terms of how we go about it. So we're not ever going to get to the end of ideas. Now, pendulum will swing back and forth as to who has the advantage, the defense or the offense. We've seen trends where the defense takes over. Remember 46 defense, Buddy Ryan's, right? Ran until people figured out how to block it. Now everybody has what we call a bear check when they jump into it. Now we've got a play that slices and dices it, so you can't jump into it very often unless it's a surprise deal or you're trying to bait somebody into a bear check and then back out of it. It's just a ultimate game of rock, scissors, paper. You can win, you can lose, and you're just trying to figure out where's the best chance to have victory.
Well, and use pendulum. I've used the word cyclical, but I don't know that it's going to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that it's going to be quite as cyclical or pendulum because I think TV and the conferences and the fans want more scoring. So I don't know.
Oh, we love offense. The rules are predicated to lead to more offense. The idea that you can have offensive linemen 3 and 4 yards down the field blocking a running play and still throw a forward pass has made sure that we're going to have more offense because you put linebackers and safeties who have responsibilities when we talk about gaps in terms of a run responsibility, you put them in such conflict they can't do it. We've seen the changing of what middle linebackers look like. They have to be able to now play man-to-man coverage. They don't have to be as big and burly as the Ray Nitschkes and the Dick Butkuses of the past. We've seen safeties shrink down to corner size because they have to have cover ability, which means they have to be able to tackle in space one-on-one. And in that deal, we're not nearly as much a downhill defensive football team, more catch. And when you're only still, we haven't changed how many yards it takes to get a first down. So we're going to give up more first downs. We're going to give up more points, but we're going to try to keep that under wraps so that our offense, which is also taking advantage of the offensive rules, can outscore you.
Tennessee is taking advantage of that with a guy named Josh Heupel.
Right.
And you said something that I thought was incredibly strong last year. I think it was at the Knoxville Quarterback Club. That if Tennessee had another chance at Georgia, they either could or would, correct me if I've misspoken, but could or would beat Georgia if they had another go-round.
I think as Josh Heupel looked at that film and Hendon Hooker looked at that film, now later Hendon Hooker would get hurt, so he wasn't going to be available should that rematch have occurred. But they would have both said, we know how to attack this defense. Certainly Kirby would have made some adjustments as well, and there would have been some defensive changes, but I thought, based on what the film showed, that the Georgia crowd was as much responsible for that victory as was the great effort of the Georgia football team, because Tennessee could not get to the plays that were offered based on the look. And it wasn't because of disguise. It was because of the inability to communicate.
You know, Hendon Hooker said something that was very interesting to me just this week at SEC Media Days. Because he had been criticized some, and Joe Milton has too, for some overthrows, some errant passes. And he said it's not an accuracy issue, it's more being on the same page of the receiver.
Sure.
Is that more fixable, or is it more difficult to fix with a guy who just has innate inaccuracy
It
issues?
depends on, and I'd have to have been in the meeting rooms as they installed those particular plays, but it depends on if the route that is run by the receiver is predicated on a defensive look or predicated on a play call. If normally when you and I think of play calls, we think, okay, the receiver is going to go down 10 and go break to the outside. Well, that might be if it gets single high safety.
Mhm.
If he gets a different look, then that route might change to a different kind of reaction. And how those two players see the field is determined about which way he's going, right?
Mhm.
And if I'm thinking that he's stopping and he's thinking he's going, and all of a sudden I have to regain my footing so as I can launch a ball that I wasn't anticipating throwing, I might not launch it in the more accurate way that I would have if it would have been my first choice. So corresponding footwork to where the ball lands is critical to accuracy, and understanding what the defense is telling that receiver to do is also critical, and it looks different from those different vantage points.
When you watch ball, you see 100 times more than me. So where would you rank Josh Heupel in terms of an offensive mind in college football right now?
Josh is a space guy. He's like Wee Willie Keeler back in baseball, hit them where they ain't, right? He's looking for air. Homer Smith, my old offensive coordinator, we're looking for air. We're trying to expand. When you create splits of offensive linemen, the more you split out, the more it seems like there's gaps, but you're also creating more air for a running back. As an example, Josh spreads the field with his wideouts. You can see that, whether it's 2x2 or 3x1, they're really far away from the adjacent tackle. And in so doing, you dictate to the defense what you're going to do in those spaces. Those are gaps. And what you're going to do, are you going to get all the way out there with those receivers, trying to make sure that you don't get beat outside? Now there's more air for your running game. If you try to creep in to create either pass rush or outflank your run game, then there's particular opportunities outside with the space that's created. And then playing the cat and mouse game of play action, which now is kind of an RPO world, run pass option, based on how you react in those gap players, whether they're committing to the run and now giving you space behind, and then you're filling the space. You're just going to where there's air. And he has done that, whether he did it with Drew Lock when he was at Missouri as the coordinator, whether he did it with Dylan Gabriel at UCF, and now doing it with Hendon Hooker and now Joe Milton. They're understanding where the space is and fill the space, and let's play catch.
Let's go back to Georgia. Without seeing Joe Milton this season, but you have seen him before, what do you think of Tennessee's chances of most likely upsetting? I'm sure Georgia will be favored, upsetting Georgia.
Well, they have the film of last year where there were opportunities. So they're going to have a home crowd, which means that there will be no excuse not to be able to communicate, because I thought Georgia's home crowd was very influential last year. That doesn't mean that they're the same team. We'll have to see how they play. There's a number of really important pieces of Tennessee that have off to the next level, as is the case of Georgia. I would guess right now that Georgia's ahead in depth. But Georgia is going to play with a new quarterback. Joe Milton's relatively new, although that Orange Bowl experience is going to pay huge dividends in his confidence level. I look at that as the game that Georgia is the question mark game. I think Georgia is going to line up 11 of 12 times feeling like they're clearly the best team, and they're going to have to help the other team beat them, by complacency or what have you. Tennessee at Tennessee, as Alabama found out last year, is going to be a different deal. That's the game that Georgia is going to have to play at their level best to keep what I anticipate being an undefeated season going.
Since you coached, what's the most significant change? Because there's been a lot in college football as a whole.
What's the best thing that's changed? Well, as an offensive coach, the RPO is a revelation, right? That's a beautiful thing. Defensive coaches got to be pulling their hair out, but if you've got a running quarterback and the ability to RPO, you should stay on the field more often than not. As a lover of the game, I certainly love that players can transfer and go places where they can participate. I don't like the idea of poaching. I've always been an advocate for, hey, look, if this young man can't play on my team but can play on your team, I want him to come to your team. I want him to come to your team and play, and I'll have a scholarship. You'll have a great player, and I'll have a scholarship to give to somebody else that can help me someplace else on my team. That's a win-win. Win-win deals, no one should sit. But when you're coming and calling a player vicariously, somebody else, third party's making that call, and my guy now is going to your place because there's a better deal, an NIL deal or what have you, and he wants to go there as opposed to the place where he committed. And that's not win-win. That's a win-loss. That, to me, should go back to the old way, which now says he has to sit a year. That's not to punish the player. It's to keep the other coach from trying to get him because he can't have him right away.
I like it.
You see what I'm saying? If I vote no, and even though the other coach wants him and is willing to compensate him, to me, that kid can still go, but he has to sit. He's not losing anything. He's just losing the immediacy of the deal. But the coach who wants him has to wait for him. That will settle all this down, and that's where we should be in the transfer portal.
I want to say one last thing. I think that I interviewed you, and you probably don't remember it because it's been a long time ago. And I used the term, if you had a bet such and such. And you were involved in this goofy where you did nothing wrong, and you're in this basketball tournament.
Bet, yeah, it's a bad word. Yeah, I don't even swim in pools anymore.
But, and it's just so funny how much things have changed because gambling's so prevalent. And for those that don't know, you were just part of an NCAA basketball pool.
I had
this big hubbub.
Was driving home one March afternoon right before the NCAA tournament was to begin, and a buddy called me, and I went over to a brokerage firm and sat there with about 25 guys from the country club that were all golf friends, and they were all bidding on a Calcutta for the March Madness. And I watched it and watched the deal. People were asking. I had looked at a college basketball game. I'd been out recruiting. I had no information for anybody, but I had fun with them cutting up and such. And then at the end of it, I was asked, do you want to be on our team? And I said, sure. Never thinking I was breaking any rules and so forth. But anyway, it blew up, got fired, had to defend myself, won the lawsuit. But it's amazing, as we now have gone through another scandal with Pat Fitzgerald and stuff at Northwestern, when you pull up coaching scandals, my name keeps coming up like on the first page.
That's ridiculous. I can help you with your SEO on that.
Well, I would love that. But the idea that I was, quote, bad boy, I think it bothers my kids more than it bothers anybody. Because my kids all would love for dad to be a coach again, right? But the fact that I've not been able to get back in since losing the job at UCLA, which was, we didn't win enough games. I think it bothers them because whenever there's an opening, hey, there's this thing out there, right? That has, and no one really bothers to really do the deep dive as to what happened there. But you know what? Here's the deal. In life, if you're bitter, it only impacts you. And so you just go on. I'm blessed to be at CBS. I'm blessed to be with Sirius XM. I get to talk about a game that I love that's been terrific to me. And I look forward to being a part of it in this way, hopefully for years to come.
This is one of the good guys, no doubt about it. Rick Neuheisel, I certainly appreciate it. I'm sure your kids are watching so they can like and subscribe. And but truly one of the good guys. I appreciate the time. We'll have Benjamin Watson coming up next with ESPN former Georgia tight end off the Oak Sports.